Chapter 16 of The Phantom of the Opera, entitled Madame Giry's Astounding Revelations as to Her Personal Relations with the Opera Ghost. So now we're back at the office, and it's the night of Christine's disappearance. What we learn is that the Opera Ghost has been paid once. They finally caved in, but in the process of paying him, they tried to catch him, and they were unsuccessful at doing so. So now they're going to try it a second time, but before they get started, they question Madame Giry. What they want to know is why she's on such good terms with the Opera Ghost, and she tells them about a letter that he wrote to her in which he details a bunch of historical figures, and he puts her daughter on that list at the very end of it as potentially becoming an empress, though it's not explained entirely about what happens to that end. She also goes on to state that she was very obedient to the Opera Ghost and to Monsieur Paulini. This leads them to suspect that she's part of the extortion plot. They do find out that she gets paid by the Opera Ghost. Therefore, on this evening, she's to be detained. She then does something very odd. She accuses Richard of taking the money and then states that he doesn't even know that he has the money. And this leads to more inquiry where we find out what's going on with the payment to the Opera Ghost. Chapter 17, entitled The Safety Pin Again. So with the idea that Madame Giry has put money in Richard's pocket, Moncharmin thinks that Richard has taken the money. Richard denounces this accusation, and they proceed with a second try at catching the ghost in the action. And here we learn some interesting things about Madame Giry and her role in all of this. It turns out she had a second envelope full of phony money that goes into the box, and then she takes the real money and she puts it into the back pocket of Richard. This is how the ghost then collects his money. He finds Richard and he snatches it out of his pocket, and Richard nor Moncharmin ever know how the money was taken. It's all a sleight of hand in essence. What they do is they lock Madame Giry up, and then they proceed to move about the opera house with the money in the back pocket, only this time they know that it's in the back pocket. They tell everyone not to touch them, and they do things like walking backwards, which is now explained. They're being vigilant. They don't want anyone approaching that they can't see. Nothing works. The money's still there. They go back to the office. Now Richard starts to suspect Moncharmin because on the previous occasion, Moncharmin had followed Richard to the office, so it could have been Moncharmin. They decide that a safety pin will work to attach the envelope to the suit. That way, if anybody grabs the money, they'll know who it is. The problem is they didn't seal the envelope. So what they do is they wait in the office patiently. It gets ghostly in there. They get comfortable. They do talk about the idea of a ghostly atmosphere. And then at some point in time, right before the knocking at the door with the announcement of Christine's disappearance, they check the pocket and they find that the money is missing. So at this point, they are completely dumbfounded, and they start to believe in a supernatural cause. Chapter 18 of The Phantom of the Opera, entitled The Commissary, the Viscount, and the Persian. There's commotion all throughout the opera house at this point. The new managers are clueless about Christine because they've been waiting in their office for some sign of whoever might be trying to get the money. Between everyone, Raoul inserts himself and he tells them about Eric, to which they all think that he is crazy. And it's here that the inspector questions Raoul a little further and goes on to tell Raoul that he thinks Philippe, because he didn't approve of the marriage between Raoul and Christine, he thinks that Philippe has taken off with Christine and Raoul decides to go chasing after his brother. Only in the process, the Persian appears and stops Raoul in his tracks. These chapters are kind of a circus when it comes to storytelling. There's a lot of time jumping around and there's a lot of asides, and then we have a lot of dialogue that you have to keep track of. What does emerge in the process is the idea of trust and deception. The circus-like effect of these chapters is due to the idea that deception is being used to enact criminal behavior. And when there's deception and criminal behavior involved, there's suspicion. Moncharmin suspects Richard. Richard suspects Moncharmin, and they both suspect Madame Giry. On that note, we have to look at Madame Giry and try to judge as to whether we think her behavior is ethical or not. On the one hand, the opera ghost likes her and she is in good hands with him. But on the other hand, she is participating in his illegal schemes to extort money from the new managers. We have to kind of examine ourselves as we judge Madame Giry. Is she a good person or is she a bad person? The Persian keeps appearing in this novel. He doesn't take on a lot of narrative time. He just appears and gives directions. He appears and he looks at everyone, or he appears and he says something and then he vanishes. So at this point, we can't tell whether he's with Eric or if he's just some guy who knows about Eric, or if he's just suspects things, or if he's just out of his mind. We have no information about this person, and so we're left to wonder at this point, who exactly is the Persian?